Hi guys, and thanks for joining me today. If you're new here, I'm Marilyn, and if you're returning, thanks so much for coming back. Now, I've been working on an embroidery and bling design, and so in today's video, we're going to do a test run of that design. Part of the design is applique, so I also have this fabric. I'm going to put the design on this light mint colored shirt, and then I have my thread already on my machine. To cut the flock out, I'm going to use a Caesar Romeo cutting machine, and I'm going to show you how you maneuver through the software to get the job done. Now, I've also made this design so that if you don't have an embroidery machine, you could cut out HTV and you could still have the bling around it. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's take a look at the two designs. Then we're going to go ahead and cut the flock. Then we'll do the embroidery. So with the design that I'm using today, I made it so that you could either do it with bling and embroidery, and that would be this file here, or if you want to use HTV, you bring in this file. So that I can show you the whole file, I'm going to use this one today, but really all I'm going to cut right now is the bling template. So let me go ahead and pull up Leonardo Design Studio. I'm going to go up to File, Import, and it's right here, so I'll click on it and I'll say Open. Now for me, I don't want to edit anything. I'm just going to say cut only. Now I can say next. Also, I do like it to show the solid fills, so we'll click there and I'll say apply. Now this came in at 10.680 inches wide. That is the exact width that I need, and the height is correct as well. Now I want to go ahead and ungroup these. So I hover right here and then click on this, which is ungroup. Now, if I were cutting HTV with this file, I would want to mirror this because you mirror it with HTV, at least most HTV, and the same with this one. But I'm not going to cut those right now. All I want to do is cut the bling template. Now with the Caesar Romeo, you don't have to use a cutting mat, but I like to, and I like to use my Cricut cutting mats. With the Caesar, it starts cutting from down here. You can tell it where to cut from, but it defaults to down here. So I'm going to go ahead and put my rhinestone flock on the bottom half of this mat. Now once I put it on, I like to use a brayer tool and really get it adhered down to the mat. In this clip, I'm just getting my mat installed into the Caesar Romeo cutting machine. So I get it adjusted to where I think it should be with the rollers up or unlocked. And when I think it's good, I go ahead and lock those rollers down. And with these machines, it's pretty easy to have your mat go in crooked, so I like to run it back and forth a bit to make sure it's going to go in pretty straight. After that, I use the arrows on the cutting machine screen to get the blade where I want it in the front left corner of the flock. Or if you're looking at the mat on the computer screen, you might call this the bottom left corner. Now that my material's ready to go, I'm going to say Send Design. I'll leave these defaults alone, and I'll say Send. Now on this next screen, I have some time to change things a little bit. I want to move mine up and over just a little bit, and I want to put a weed box around it. So I can click right here where it says Auto Weed Box, and you're going to see cut lines around this. So we'll click it on, and there they are. Now I'll just say Send to Cutter. Lastly, I'll just say OK. Now while that's cutting, I want to show you what happens if you bring this into Cricut Design Space. So let me go ahead and minimize this. And I have Cricut Design Space right here. So I'm going to say Upload Image. I'll click on Browse. Here's the exact same image. Remember, it should come in at 10.680 inches wide. So we'll select it and we'll say Open. Here I'm just going to say Continue. And then right here, I'm just going to say Upload. And look at that, it came in at 3.77 inches wide. That is way too small. Two things. First of all, the rhinestones would not fit in these holes. And then second of all, if you're doing this with embroidery, those rhinestones aren't going to be large enough for the embroidery. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. And then I can see my width and my height up here. So remember, we're going to change this to 10.680. And that changed the height to the exact correct height. So now what I could do is I could ungroup this by clicking right here. Notice that on this file, the word spring has fever knocked out of it. Because if you're using HTV, even though you can layer some HTVs, I want everything to be stuck to the shirt and I don't want it layered at all. Now the other file, let me get rid of this. The other file, if I click on new, let's click on upload, upload image. I'll click on browse. This is the one that I designed for people that are going to do this with embroidery. So I'll select it and I'll say open. Let's say continue and upload. Now you might be wondering, and look, that came in the right size. Here, let's look at the actual size instead of the rounded size. So we'll get rid of this 10.68 by 6.257. That is perfect. Now you might be wondering, if I'm doing this for embroidery embling, why do I even have the word spring here? Well, some people like to cut out their fabric using a Cricut, a Silhouette, a Leonardo, or even a laser, and I wanted you to have the file so that you could cut your fabric out if you wanted to. Okay, time to see how well it cuts. Sometimes it cuts perfectly or close to perfectly. Sometimes I have to take quite a few of what's called flock dots out. So let's just see what we have. So this is the part outside the weeding box. And that cut nicely. Now what I like to do is take a corner and really pull back at a steep angle. And that looks pretty good. Let me see if I see any of the flock dots that stayed inside. I don't know that I have one single flock dot left behind. So now it's time to put them on what I like to store them on. This is a flexible chopping mat. I got this off of Amazon, and I'll put a link to it in the video description just in case you're interested in it. Then I'm just going to go ahead and put my template down. And this is ready to use over and over and over. Here's the shirt that I'm going to use today. I already pre-pressed it and I marked the center with this marking sticker. That's going to help me when I hoop this up. Now it's time to put the no-show mesh inside. So I have some no-show mesh and I have some basting spray. What I'll do is I'll spray the back of the piece of stabilizer, get it inside the shirt, and I'll meet you at the hooping station. Now, in addition to using the no-show mesh stabilizer inside my shirt, I like to use a piece of tearaway stabilizer on the hooping station. Because this part of the metal bracket goes onto the machine first, my shirt's going to be upside down on the machine. So I'll need to make sure to turn my design upside down as well. Now, I did not do a great job of that, and the fabric is a little loose. So I'm going to pull on my stabilizer, which is attached to the shirt with that basting spray, to make it better, or to make it smoother. Now I want to frame around the design to see if I need to move my hoop. I do need to move it, so I'm going to do that and then frame the design again. And I'm going to do this as many times as I need to until I like the placement. Now that the placement's good, I need to remove this marking sticker. And I also want to secure this pink thread up where it's supposed to go. The first stitch will be a placement stitch so that I will know where to put my applique fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and press the start button. Here's what it looks like so far. You can see exactly where I need to put the letters, so let's go ahead and get our fabric ready and press it on. I'm cutting my fabric out with my X-Tool P2 CO2 laser today, and the fabric already has Heat and Bond Light on the back. I really love pre-cutting my fabric because it is so much more precise versus me hand cutting it after it's tacked down. And this cut out beautifully. So now I'll use my mini iron and I'll press it to the shirt. I like to use this wool pressing mat under my hoop when I press the letters on. It's large enough to support the full hoop, which helps keep the fabric secure in the hoop. I just use those placement stitches to show me where I need to lay my fabric down, and then I just press straight down because if I iron from side to side, you can cause the letters to shift a little bit. Since I press the letters on, I really don't need a tack down stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that stitch and go right to the satin border stitch. The satin border stitch stitched out beautifully, but when the fill stitch of the word fever started, the machine stopped with a thread break notification. Now the thread wasn't actually broken, but it was shredded, and this can be a warning sign that you need a new needle. So I removed the hoop to also check in the bobbin area, but it was fine. So I continued on with this needle, trying to get through this project, and I did have it happen one more time before the design was fully stitched out. So before I use the machine again, I need to change that needle out because there's a burr or something on the needle that's rubbing on the thread to cause it to shred. Now, some days working on YouTube videos is just a little harder than others, and today was one of those days. In the next part of this video, I talked all the way through it because I definitely prefer to talk you through the video as I'm making the video versus going back and doing a voiceover. Well, my microphone apparently wasn't fully seated into the iPad and no sound recorded on this next part. But I love how this shirt is looking so far. I usually love bright colors, but I really like these lighter springy colors on the shirt. And since no sound recorded, I'm going to speed up the video and just talk about what I was doing here. So here I'm brushing my SS10 Hot Fix Rhinestones into the template. I pour a lot of stones onto the template, but I can remove the excess ones later. I use a paint trim brush to move the stones around, and I have a lot of videos where I show this process in detail. So check one of those out if you want to see this process in real time. With this template, I ran into a few issues when I was picking up the stones with transfer tape, but I took care of getting it worked out, and it was time to add the bling to the shirt. When you add the bling to an embroidery design, the embroidery really acts as your guide on where to place your stones. But take a little extra time to make sure that you have fairly equal gaps between the stones and the embroidery thread all the way around. I pressed the stones onto the shirt using my HTV Rod Auto Press 2, and I used a temperature of 350 degrees, and I pressed for 15 seconds. Now these stones are a warm peel, so you can remove your transfer tape when you get the shirt off the press. And this shirt turned out so nice. I was really worried about the combination of the shirt color, the fabric, and the thread color, but I really love how it turned out. And I love how these stones look with everything. So then I removed the excess stabilizer, and this is the final result. It looks so sweet. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and until my next video, bye-bye.